From the realization that we won't get to see what The Flash would have kicked off, to why big-name actors couldn't help impress audiences, this is the harsh reality. The DCEU is coming to an end. DC fans were split when it was announced that James Gunn, a prolific director who has worked on both Marvel and DC sets, was now DC Studios' new boss. Though fans have enjoyed Gunn's movies, that didn't necessarily mean they wanted the DCEU to fully come to an end. Now that Gunn has announced a soft reboot to introduce the DC Universe, fans must realize that the DCEU is fully coming to an end by the end of 2023. As a result, there are quite a few things that we won't get to see. Storylines won't be resolved. We'll never see some of our favorite actors as DC's iconic superheroes and villains, now that the DCEU is coming to an end. We won't get to see how The Flash could have been a whole new beginning for the cinema franchise.
So as soon as he turns up, we'll get him.
Pinning down a bad guy that can teleport, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah, and how's a boomerang-wielding psycho suddenly a tech genius?
Before James Gunn took over and began to work on the soft reboot to introduce the DC Universe, the powers that be over at DC explained that The Flash would, in many ways, kick off a new era for the studio. They all had such high hopes for the new movie, even though the lead star, Ezra Miller, had more than a few legal troubles in the past few years. Regardless, DC has stayed positive. Now we're not going to really see why they were so excited for The Flash. After all, just about everything we see in The Flash won't lead to anything else now that the DCEU is dead. There is a hope that Gunn will somehow manage to work The Flash into the DC Universe. As he said himself, the new franchise will simply be a soft reboot, rather than a whole new one. But it's still a real shame, as The Flash was supposed to be the beginning of the new era of the DCEU. Now it's just the complete end of it. The Flash and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom will be the two final movies of the DCEU, both of which will be released in 2023. As a result, 2024 will not feature any DC movies, which nicely prepares fans for 2025's first DC Universe film, Superman Legacy. Unfortunately, we'll never get to see what The Flash was preparing us for, which is a shame indeed. The Flash could have pointed us in the direction of what to expect in future movies, in storylines that might later be explored, and in storylines from past movies that might be better filled in. The DCEU as a whole had the opportunity to do this as well, but now it never will. What about all those little storylines that were hinted at in Batman vs. Superman and other films? There were so many potential storylines and backstories that could have been explored in the DCEU, and these storylines were often hinted at throughout the many movies that the studio released. There's a feeling that if the bosses at DC had a serious plan about what they were doing with their film franchises, such as the MCU has for a while now, this all would have been resolved a long time ago. Now we're left thinking about all the stories that could have been. One story that should have continued on? Batman's, and specifically Ben Affleck's Batman. We never got a solo Batman film with Affleck at the helm, which is more than a little missed opportunity. When Affleck's Batman was first introduced, viewers got a lot of hints about what his hero would be like, and what his past held. There were hints about Robin and the Joker, so fans were really excited when DC said a solo Batman film was in the works, but then we never really heard anything about it again. Affleck was supposed to star and direct the film, but the entire process dragged on and on. Eventually, it looked like Affleck would never get that solo Batman film, which left fans stunned, especially because so many felt that Affleck had a ton of potential if DC would just give him the chance. But now that the DCEU is coming to an end and the DC Universe is being introduced, and now that Affleck is done as Batman, we'll never get to see this film come to fruition. Obviously, fans were disappointed to realize this, just as they were to hear about Henry Cavill and his time as Superman coming to an end. For a while, fans couldn't figure out what the DCEU was doing with Cavill's Superman. For the most part, fans really liked Cavill in the role. However, they also felt that he needed more consistent work, scripts, and direction than what he was given. When it was revealed that Cavill would be returning to the DCEU after his cameo in Black Adam, fans were more than a little pumped. But then Gunn dashed everyone's hopes and dreams when he revealed they would be rebooting Superman. In this new version, Cavill will not be returning to the role. This came after fans thought they would get another Superman movie with Cavill in the lead role, so it's safe to say the disappointment was evident. Though Gunn's plans for Superman Legacy and subsequent Superman movies do sound exciting, this doesn't mean that fans aren't disappointed that Cavill's time as Superman has come to an end. Similar to Affleck's Batman, Cavill could have done so much more if the bosses at DC had just given him the chance. As we say goodbye to the DCEU Superman and Batman, we also must remember the other big superheroes that we'll likely no longer see, at least in their DCEU forms. superheroes. One thing that the DCEU always focused on was the big superheroes of the comic books. While the MCU managed to give screen time to huge superheroes too, they also did a great job of bringing in lesser-known heroes to better flesh out the entire universe. The DCEU didn't really do this. Instead, they focused on the biggest superheroes they had in their arsenal. Wonder Woman, for example, was a great addition to the cinematic universe, and many fans loved her first movie. However, the second Wonder Woman movie did not do her justice, and now it isn't really thought about at all. The movie had its flaws, which are evident. Even though Wonder Woman 1984 fell flat in many ways, fans still held hope that they would see more of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, and that her eventual appearances in the DCEU would make up for this second film.
These people are dying. Nothing to eat and in the village enslaved, she said.
I understand that.
Women,
we need
children.
to make our next position by
How
Saturday.
can you say that? What is the matter with you?
The same can be said for the other big superheroes and villains in the universe that didn't get the chance to shine. But that was a recurring theme with the DCEU. Their biggest characters didn't impress audiences. Something was always amiss, whether it was character development, storylines, dialogue, you name it. With Gunn at the helm of the new DC universe, there's hope that this won't be as massive an issue as it was before. After all, he is writing the first installment in the universe, Superman Legacy, so this should help him and everyone else at the studio pinpoint how they want the new universe to be. But this excitement for something new doesn't mean fans are disappointed with the biggest heroes in the DCEU. So as we all face the reality that the DCEU is coming to an end, we must also realize why it didn't work. The lack of consistent character development is definitely one of the biggest culprits in the DCEU's failure. Superman and Batman alone should have impressed audiences, but there's a feeling they really didn't. The DC universe might also want to look at the actors who just couldn't impress audiences. The DCEU has a ton of big movie stars who signed on to play iconic roles, yet these big names didn't really impress fans.
Bruce, please.
If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
By comparison, the MCU successfully cast smaller actors in bigger roles. For example, nobody really knew Chris Hemsworth or Chris Evans before their Thor and Captain America roles. The new DC universe might want to take a hint from the MCU and ignore what the DCEU did. After all, some people can't look at Will Smith as Deadshot. They just see Will Smith. That's definitely something to remember, as it might have been yet another reason why the DCEU failed. So from how big name actors couldn't save the DCEU, to the disappointment over not being able to see how the Flash could have saved it, this was the harsh reality of the DCEU coming to an end.
And now he's just your run-of-the-mill baddie. Well, except for the explosive hardware.
Okay,